Welcome everyone to another episode of Recover You. I'm so excited today to have Lily on the podcast. So let me do a quick introduction and then tell everybody why I'm so excited that you're here. From anxious school psychologist to peaceful registered three principles practitioner, Lily is passionate about helping people uncover the peace that already lies hidden beneath their anxious thoughts. She loves working with individuals, groups, and sharing lighthearted yet transformative videos on mental well-being on social media. And your videos are awesome, I will say. It's
Yeah,
they're pretty fantastic. So I'm so pumped to have you on because I've worked with you in a couple different ways over the past several years. I was in I think you did like I don't know if it was like a 4 week or 8 week class or something that I took like a couple years ago. And then I started working with you one-on-one like in this past year. And like I said, your videos on social media are just so encouraging. And one of the things that you talk about a lot is intrusive thoughts. And that has been so helpful to me because I think a lot of people that have intrusive thoughts feel like there's something wrong with them and maybe like they're very alone and like their brain is different in some way. And we talk about this a lot on the podcast in terms of shame and addiction and all these types of things that when we have something sort of in our brain that we feel alone with and we feel ashamed about or scared of, it festers that way. But if we bring it out into the light and talk about it, that by itself often diminishes some of the charge that it carries, and we can talk about it and we can get support. And you do such an amazing job of sort of like destigmatizing like anxiety and intrusive thoughts. And so that has been incredibly encouraging for me. And I am so happy to have you on because there's so many times where I either like will share your video or tell people to go follow you, or like within my friend group, I'll be like, okay, I'm gonna Lily you right now. And I'll give some Lily advice and they know what that is. And I mean, you have had this real ripple effect. And I think what you've done is so impactful. And particularly in what we're going to talk about today, I think in the community of recovery and betrayal and things like that, intrusive thoughts can make things more sticky along the recovery road. So I'm really happy to have you here. I'm happy to share you with the world. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for such a lovely introduction.
So yeah, I'm just like super pumped, like you are just like I want to share Lily with the world. What I'd like to maybe start with is this has really been on my mind in terms of how intrusive thoughts can negatively impact recovery for people. Because again, I think there's this idea that there's something wrong with me, and I think it shows up in different ways from the addict in recovery and the betrayed partner. So I just kind of want to set the context so that people listening maybe go, oh my gosh, like that's what's happening to me. And then we can kind of talk about what do we do about it.
Okay. Yeah.
So one of the ways I think it shows up a lot of times with addicts is the morality piece comes in. They want so badly to be sober and to do the right thing that they get confused about the idea of a relapse versus an intrusive thought. Because again, I think intrusive thoughts are not things that are talked about often. So when they're trying to get into recovery and their thought life plays a part in their addiction, and then they have in recovery or sobriety, these random images or random thoughts pop up. If they're unaware of what that is, it can be very scary for them. And along with that, I think if a betrayed partner doesn't understand intrusive thoughts or OCD, which I think ADD and OCD probably like compound that, right? Like I think we're more our spicy brains are more susceptible to it, right? Like there's quiet brains and there's active brains. I think active brains are more prone to like the intrusive thoughts, right? As I think if we're not aware of this, then a betrayed partner can also go, okay, well, that's totally, you are not sober, or that was bad, or they may not know always how to respond to an intrusive thought. So maybe we can just start with what are intrusive thoughts and, how do you view them and what makes them stick around and makes them so scary? And then, why do they show up and all that kind of stuff? So what's your perspective on like, what are they?
Yeah. Well, an intrusive thought is an unwanted thought, because if it wasn't intrusive, it would be welcome, and it would kind of also, by definition, it sometimes can seem like it wouldn't fit your what you'd want, or like it's not like in flow of like if you were like, what am I want for dinner? And you might be like, I don't know, do I want a salad? Oh no, maybe do I want a pasta? Like, and other thoughts would be coming that would be like in line with, ooh, what food am I going to be eating? Or like, what show am I going to be watching? And then an intrusive thought could be like, what if you stabbed your husband? You'd be like, what? And so, but everybody gets intrusive thoughts. Most people just don't remember them unless they're really funny or out of place.
Mhm.
There's probably not one person in the world if they just don't remember them because they just let it go. But sometimes it's very common. Even if you're walking down the stairs, you might have an image of you falling, or and it's to me, it always starts out with love, kind of, say, for the example of walking down the stairs, your the original thought is probably like, hey, be mindful of walking down the stairs so you don't fall. um
Mm.
or if you were holding a baby,
Mhm.
this is this precious baby, hold on tight to them. So that's, to me, where it would probably start, is love. It starts with a loving thought, and then, kind of like the game of telephone, where um, the first thought that somebody could be aware of is, what if I throw this baby? What if I drop this baby? But
Mhm.
also, not all intrusive thoughts are what if. For some people, it could be drop the baby, and then they could get really scared because the feeling that they have is one of complete love and recognition of what an important task and how vulnerable this baby is that they're holding down the stairs, walking down the stairs. And the thought that they're aware of is, dropping the baby. Um, but so, depending, to me, on so many factors, but a big one, I think, is the state of mind that someone's in, and also the understanding that they have. So if someone was, really in a really good state of mind, like they had all their bandwidth, and they didn't even have to understand this, they had that thought, they dismiss it, they let it go, they finish walking down the stairs and don't pay it another mind.
Mhm.
But if somebody was maybe in a more stressed or more vulnerable position and they had that thought, they could have an innocent overreaction to it. And so, why I see that intrusive thoughts get sticky is because people have an innocent misunderstanding of them, which I think, kind of, it's nice we get to clear it up today.
Yeah.
Um, they have a misunderstanding and they think, why did I have that thought?
Mhm.
Um, and kind of to bring it back maybe into um, couples, or like relationship stuff. There's so many topics that we could go off of. But it could even be, and sometimes it's just an image, or it's just anything like, somebody could be with a family member or a colleague and have a sexual intrusive thought pop up. And
Mhm.
that's really common. And there's also so many things we could talk about there in terms of, I don't mean to take us off on a tangent either, but like a groinal response, because people's body responds to what is sexual in nature,
Yeah.
not what somebody even wants, and so this maybe would be helpful. um I don't know, and
No, no,
I don't
I think no,
off
I
of
think yeah, that's so good that you brought that up because I think that goes right into like sex addiction recovery. And when somebody has these thoughts can be very scary as they're going into recovery because they go, like what is happening in my brain, right?
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes the morality piece plays into it where you were kind of mentioning like when we feel really good, which is like I know who I am, like I have confidence in who I am, and you go like I use the example like you're driving down the road and you are going around a curve and then you're like, oh, like what if I run off the side of the road and down the mountain and die, right? Like that's an intrusive thought example. And it's like, okay, but if you know who you are and you go, oh, that's a silly thought, then you move on from it. But if you have any sort of sense of being a bad person or some like conflict there, right? So for like an addict in recovery, for example, a sexually intrusive thought, or even I love that you brought up that it can come from a place of love. So when you were saying that, I was thinking, so an addict that's trying to do all the right things and trying to get into recovery and trying to provide safety and all this kind of stuff, their brains often are kind of hyper aware of their surroundings, right? And they don't want essentially they don't want to objectify people anymore the way they have in their addiction. And so it can start from this place of like what you were saying, like be aware of your surroundings. And all of a sudden he goes, oh, but there's a pretty woman there. Oh, I have like my brain's going to do something bad with that. Right. And it's like, no, actually, like it's okay to walk through the world and know who you are. Your brain has a thought pop in. If you, and I think one thing I'd like you to sort of touch on is what do you do with that? Because when we uh, fight it, it typically gets worse, right?
Yes. Well, I want to share a story too, because I also think sometimes what we're talking about here is just thoughts. And so actually having a conversation about the nature of thought is going to be even more helpful. So my mentor once had a client who came to her and he got married and he loved his wife so much and he did not want to think about another woman ever. That was what he wanted to show his wife, his love. And so what you said is we have this intention, but then we can become hyper vigilant. So he was aware he didn't want to find any other woman attractive at all. And so, but then he's out in the world. He's like, so he keeps saying, oh no, there's an attractive woman. He had a thought, she's attractive. So he didn't go out of his house. He said, I can never leave the house again. And so then they had a housekeeper though. And so then he started having thoughts about the housekeeper. So he came to my mentor and he's like, I never want to have another thought. I think another woman's attractive. And she's like, I can't help you with that, but I
Right.
can help you understand because what you said is when we try to stop something or we try to be not humans, then we're so much more aware of the thoughts. When if he understood that, you know, having the passing thought, oh, that woman's pretty, doesn't actually isn't a betrayal. It's
Mhm.
not we can't help sometimes because I've worked with clients who have sometimes very casually like looked at someone's boobs or their private area like in a business setting, like you just so when you're not stressed about it, your eyes glance somewhere with no stress, they move back up to the person's eyes,
Yeah,
or
it's the
you might
interpretation you make of it, right? So like if you go, oh, my eyes were roaming, I wasn't intentionally doing anything wrong, then you basically move past it. If you immediately make meaning out of it and go, what does that say about me as a person? What did I do wrong? Then all of a sudden you start looping on that, right? And then it makes it worse. And then you're like, oh my gosh, what did I do? And
yeah,
then it like turns
yeah,
into a thing that it wasn't even in the first place.
exactly when you um and then you're questioning who you are as a person and you're
Right.
so confused and you've had this innocent misunderstanding and an innocent overreaction
Hmm.
rather than but when you can understand it um and so even if someone doesn't like catch it right away, say they are whatever they had a thought that a coworker was attractive and then they did go to feeling shame about it, and so they went to, oh, I'm a horrible person. The bad feeling is feedback,
Hmm.
um, and an invitation to let go of our thinking. So that's why it's actually our feelings are such a gift because tension or anxiety or feeling shame or guilt. And I didn't know this for like 37 years. I thought if I felt badly, that meant my thought is true, but the
Oh,
feeling bad,
say that again. Yeah, yeah. You think
um,
when we feel badly, we think our thoughts are true.
yeah, I thought the bad feeling was like, yep, check.
Mm,
For me, if it was even a lot of my thoughts when I was younger were was so afraid of my parents dying or something bad happening to them. And so then we feel our thinking, my stomach would drop, my heart would ache. And I thought, yeah, this must be true. And as I got
mm.
older, sometimes it would be social thinking, maybe my friends don't like me. I am a horrible person. And then your stomach drops, or everyone has their different feeling, but like our heart hurts, we feel it. And I thought we can think, in this context, um, but also sometimes, and this is where the nuance of just thoughts, like I recognize for me, and I definitely, because I've been aware of it, it doesn't really happen. When my boyfriend would go out of town, I would have much more insecure thoughts, and a thought could pop up. He's cheating. He is probably going to cheat, and it would hurt my heart. And, we have a thought, and our imagination can bring it to life, whether it's true or not, whether it is on both sides of, to me, the conversation that you're having. Somebody can feel like, oh, I'm a horrible person. I guess it is. I'm always going to betray the people I love. And it feels so bad. But the bad feeling, like if I'm, we're just on a podcast, somebody wouldn't see me, but it's like we can squeeze our hands together into fists where our nails dig into our palms. We can do that. But the pain wakes us up to let go, because it's like we're either here like all tight and in pain, and it's actually a gift that because it wakes us up, we fall out of our thinking into our heart. And it can be on both sides. If someone is creating a story with their thinking about their partner, and I don't know, I'll be quiet there, but I think that's where, just because you might feel shame or guilt or disgust or confusion about yourself doesn't mean that that is true. We can start to see that as invitations. Like, I think I've gone into my imagination and I'm suffering just because I've had this innocent overreaction to my thinking.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It happens on both sides, right? So I think I'm so excited about this conversation because I think it happens, like you said, kind of to everybody has them, right? I feel like some people are maybe more prone to having them stick around in the rumination cycle. Uh, Hello, me. That's been very difficult. But the understanding the conversation around what you were saying, like the nature of thought, you've talked about how if we recognize that it's just a thought and it's not a reflection of who we are. And in fact, one of the things you said, I think years ago when I started kind of following you and in your program and everything, was basically like really, really good people have intrusive thoughts that are really bad. And that's why or seem very bad, and that's why they bother you, is because you're a good person, like you were saying, like it wouldn't bother you if you're a sociopath, right? Like if you were gonna actually act on it, it wouldn't make you feel guilty. If you wanted to do something, it wouldn't make you feel shame, right? And so I think that's a really important thing to sort of recognize, that those responses are essentially the indication that the reminder that you don't want to do that thing, that you are a good person, that it is okay. And um the idea that it's just a thought can be very freeing, because you talk about how if we recognize that it's just a thought, then we can also recognize that if we just sit there and don't do anything about it, another thought will come, and it might be a better thought. It might be like a different sort of awareness. And I think that's really helpful on both sides, because let's say for the recovering addict, for example, you had a great example of like, okay, I'm going to go to the store, right? And if you're hyper fixating on like, I can't find anybody attractive, you are 100% going to fixate on someone, probably, or have some images pop in, or your brain's going to start overreacting about a lot of things, and then it's just like this negative spiral, and then you don't really know what's going on, and then they might go talk to their wife, and then their wife doesn't really know how to interpret that, and then she's upset about it, right? And so I think on both sides is really nice to understand this, because as a betrayed partner, if I all of a sudden hear that my husband is spiraling in this area, that's going to be disconcerting if I don't really understand the difference between intentional choice and intrusive thoughts. Go ahead.
No. I was just agreeing. I didn't want to go.
And then for the betrayed partner, I think there's quite a lot that can happen with intrusive thoughts. I know for me, when I was going through discovery and everything, my brain created like a lot of images around what I was finding out, and was very, very traumatizing. But then I also have patterns of like rumination, and years and years ago, before even discovery, I had like what I would consider like my first like dramatic bout of intrusive thoughts. And I never realized that that was like associated with OCD. And so I felt very alone in that. I felt very scared. I was like, what is happening to me? And nobody really explained it. I don't know how long it was until I heard the term intrusive thoughts, eventually found you. And the way that you talked about it was so freeing. And I think it's such a powerful thing to remember that the mind is a very powerful thing. It's a very creative, powerful thing. And when we understand it, I want to word this well, maybe you'll word it better than me, but when we understand it, we have total control over it. But the way you would describe things is not, it's not an active sense of control, right? It's an inactive sense of, I know what's going on. I don't have to worry about it.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, because we can't control our thoughts and we don't need to. When we have an understanding of it, truly that all thoughts are neutral and we get to choose which thoughts we bring to life. And it's up to us to we get to decide how serious we take a thought and for how long. And to me, our feeling really gives us feedback. Like we have a really great feedback loop. It lets us know if we're holding on to thought and invites us to let go of thought. And then we are, we can just keep shopping in the grocery store, knowing that we're one thought away from a whole new experience, and it is when we just have somebody's like, I don't want to get any treats at the grocery store. Then all they be thinking about is treats. But they might have that thought. And then they can realize that that thought's not serving them and like can let it go. And then you're going to be in a more peaceful state of mind, and, but I feel like I want to address what you talked about because I was just agreeing with it all of when you can understand it, then all thoughts are free to come and go. And then you're just in and when all thoughts are free to come and go, you get to decide which thoughts you bring to life, because actually how we're designed is thought just flows, and I think we can all see that of when I know every single person that's listening has gone into a room and they're like, why did I come in here? And you have to wait a minute and then you remember, one example, I was dog sitting my old dog and we ran out of poop bags. And so it's a kind of a pretty important thing. You want poop bags when you've got a dog. And so I walked back in and I remember like thinking, get poop bags. And I thought of it like as I entered the door and then the thought flew out of my head because I was inside. So on the second walk, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot poop bags. And I'm like, get poop bags when you get inside. Completely forgot again. I'm on my third walk. And so I had to keep saying to myself, poop bags, poop bags, poop bags. I got in the door. I knew I could not speak to anybody. I had to head straight there. And I had, because I'm forgetful. So I'm like, if I go into my house, I'm going to think. And so I had to work really hard to keep poop bags in my head. But what I think people don't realize is trying not to think about it is actually working. Like when people are working hard, sometimes like, I'm going to work so hard never to think of how I was betrayed. I'm going to work so hard never to think of whatever porn or another person. Well, like it's so innocent. And we're like, oh, because sometimes I think people can be like, I was working so hard never to think about that. But our brain's like a computer. It doesn't think, don't think about poop bags.
Mm-hmm. The subconscious doesn't hear the negative. So the more you think don't, your subconscious doesn't hear that. It hears the rest of the sentence.
Exactly. And so it's like how we are in a state of thoughts coming and going, which is our most natural state, is when we truly see how thought works, which is that it's neutral and it's coming and going. No work needed. We can continue to watch a movie, be in a meeting, be in a party. Like we don't have to do anything special for thoughts to flow. We don't have to journal. We don't have to talk about it. I'm saying this because you're free to do anything. If you notice, oh, I'm in a better mood. I've been at this computer. I want to get out and get a walk or whatever. Great. But when you don't even have to do anything and you are designed to have your thoughts flow and come back into balance.
Yeah, because I think one of our natural tendencies when we feel scared by something is to want to do something about it. Right. And so I think sometimes we will, kind of what you were just talking about, we want to control something that is uncontrollable. And the more we do that, the more it sticks around versus going it. I'd like maybe to go back to the idea of the thoughts that are more like what if versus I wish or I am. Because I think the ones that start with I wish or I am, those can be very scary for people. And I feel like maybe more sticky and more difficult to release because it really feels like some sort of internal identity, uh, bad, who could have that sort of thought unless it were true type thing versus sometimes a what if question is like, okay, well, what if that did happen? Okay, but it's not, right? Like I think the what if presentation almost makes it a little bit easier to let go in some sense because you're like, what if, but it's not, right? Or you can counteract that in some way. When it starts with I am or I wish and it goes against something that you actually are or want,
Mhm.
what do you do about that?
The same thing, because it's all the same, but I'm so happy you brought it up because a lot of people have it, or sometimes I have had people who have had a command about it, so it can feel like kiss her, kill him, or, it's
Mm-hmm.
I want, I know trying to keep it to the conversation that we're having here for your audience. Or it can just be an image of maybe you doing something. And so having an understanding, so it's all thought, even an image, because thought can be thinky thoughts or images of our partner doing something, of us doing something, or I wish my partner did this, or I wish for this to happen. The same, what we've been talking about, the same approach would be true to me, is seeing we get to choose which thoughts we bring to life, um, which thoughts we take seriously, and also analyzing that thought and trying to think, what does that mean about me? Isn't going to bring you more clarity. It's not going to bring you peace of mind. And also, you don't need, because sometimes I think people, I'm wondering, or I know for me, they want to punish themselves, but I can't let myself off the hook, which I'm kind of happy that we're talking about it, because sometimes what can happen is people have an understanding. So sometimes they don't have a bad feeling about it, the thought anymore. And then they're like, oh, does this mean I want it? Does this mean now that I didn't be filled with self-disgust and anxiety, like now I must want to cheat,
Now
or
I
I'm a
am a horrible person for real.
horrible person. And it's like, no. So that's a really common stage, is when people start to have an understanding. They don't maybe feel as horrible
Mm-hmm.
when that thought, whatever it is, what if I want, an image pops up. It's super cool because there's like sometimes no reaction because you understand it.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Just as, you know, to me, there's never a reason to go and analyze and get lost in our thoughts, and I've probably done this with you when we talk, but I love it with the snow globe. So if someone's just listening, it's like when you shake up a snow globe, there's all this snow. And if we think of that as our thoughts, Michael Neal is the one that said that to me. I'm never going to see more clearly by thinking more, and in the video, I'm shaking up a snow globe. But I think when we can see which thoughts we want to validate, and which thoughts, and I think because people think, well, that's very helpful because I'm gonna have more clarity if I analyze it. Why did I have this image? Or why did I think I want? Why didn't I have a big reaction? I used to feel horrible when um, to me, going into your thinking
Mm-hmm.
isn't going to be helpful there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Well,
you just,
I think it goes back into like the idea of like knowing who you are as a human being, right? Like, like I like I'm scared of knives, right? And so I don't, you pull out a knife in the kitchen, I'm like, watch out, it's 3 feet away, like kind of walk around people, right? That kind of thing. Um, and so let's say you have a thought of like you are going to be stabbed or you're going to stab someone because you have a knife in your hand, right? But like that's not who you are. You 100% with certainty know that that's not going to happen. Then that's a really good example of that thought um, just being a thought. And one of the things I love that you brought up the snow globe because you talk about when the snow calms down, that's typically where insights will come in, right? And so it's like if instead of giving the thought power, if we just let it go through, then it calms down and then we can move on. But another thing that you mentioned to me in one of our calls was the idea of the spiritual body versus the physical body, and the brain being part of the physical body. And when you take a higher perspective and really kind of bringing it back to the identity piece, if you have like a spiritual understanding of like who you are as a human being, then you can look at thoughts and things like this happening as, oh, that's how my brain works sometimes. And then when you can look at that, and I've used this, and I love that you um kind of put it in this context, because it's really helpful for me, because a thought will pop in and I'll go, oh, that my brain is being so cute. That's just my brain being my brain, and you put context to it. And so I think it really, so much of it comes back to the story we tell ourselves, or the meaning that we assign something. And so if we assign it no meaning, it doesn't mean anything. If we assign it meaning, then all of a sudden it's scary and bad, and we're going to hyperfixate on it and we're going to ruminate on it. But if we go, oh, that's just like, it's just a thought, or oh, my brain just was being my brain, and then that can be so helpful.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. Well, because also what we're talking about now is just thoughts. And you might have your first thought, like if somebody did something mean to one of my children, I might have a horrible thought about that kid. Well, like, that's not what I'm going to, you know what I mean? Like, I want to ruin their lives. But like, wait, I can have a second thought and a
Right.
third thought. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
and so that's not an intrusive thought. I mean, but sometimes there is this revenge thought that pops up. And it's just, somebody might have a thought like, we get to decide, like having the conversation about thought and who
Mhm.
we are and what brains do. Like
Yeah.
our brain, it's always sharing its opinion and narrating our experience.
Mm.
And one time, it was like a couple years ago, but I had been in the three principles conversation. I was getting my nails done and a girl came in, a woman, and I had this thought that she was like in an outdated look. Like, and she was super cute. And it was like a slightly mean thought about her outfit. And then I was like, why did I had a wave of, because I think I do identify as a very kind person. And so even though but I think there was some truth, because like it was an outdated look. I mean, like, it's so stupid to say it, but then I had this thought, like, what if you even told her? And I had like a wave of anxiety about it. Um, but that's normal. My son is 9. And when he was 7, we got his friends a present. And he then, I don't know how I knew, but he was doing something. I'm like, what are you thinking? And he said, I had a rascally thought. And it was kind of an unkind thought
Mm.
about the person he was buying a present for. But he knew enough, even at that age, that just because we have a thought doesn't mean it's ours. Like, our brain's just throwing stuff out there sometimes. And it's such a gift when we realize that, and we get to, good, kind, amazing people have all types of thoughts.
Yeah.
And and that's why I love that we're having this conversation too, because before being an anxiety coach and a three principles practitioner, I was a school psychologist. And so before I even knew the term intrusive thoughts, people talk to me about them, about just thoughts, because I think we don't even have to get caught up. Like, yeah, sure, sometimes there are so many things that are intrusive, but sometimes it's that. And I think for whatever reason, I did have more clarity and more ease. And so people, about having these conversations, I think about sometimes taboo topics, whether it was about um, harm or sex, and starting, I've had the conversation about intrusive thoughts and just thoughts with kids from 5, and my oldest client's been 68, and so I think when I started sharing on social media, I knew I wanted to talk about intrusive thoughts because I could see this sigh of relief.
Mm.
um and we didn't even have to have that label, but of like these thoughts that we think that's so weird and we feel alone. And you had started the conversation saying about how healing it is to know we're not alone, we're not weird, we're not broken. It's not like, oh, other people are just having loving, kind, rainbow heart emoji thoughts. Like, no, everyone has a whole bunch of types of thoughts. And Mr. Rogers, I think, was the one who said, if it's mentionable, it's manageable.
Mm.
And I could just see the huge sighs of relief. Probably almost every person that I've talked to, whether in a counseling setting or a coaching session, you know, we don't realize how common our thoughts are.
Yeah.
Um, and how like loving and normal we all are.
Yeah. I think the idea that a thought that we perceive as scary can come from a loving place is such a shock, maybe the first time you hear that. I don't think that would be our natural instinct to go there, right? To go, oh, that came from a good place. Um, but I think that is like when you start to understand that that's where it comes from, often that's where it's like, that's the sigh of relief, right? It's like, oh, okay. So for betrayed partners, one thing I want to just sort of mention is, so I talk often that when everything kind of blows up in your relationship and you're going through discovery and all of that, the first phase of recovery, the most important phase, is stabilization and safety. And so with that sometimes comes anxiety and hypervigilance and things like that. And in that phase, your brain is really trying to create safety for you. So actually, again, kind of tying that into what you're saying, it's really trying to, it's coming from a loving place. It's trying to protect you. So even sometimes when we have anxiety or things that we perceive as negative, our body is often trying to come from a place of making us safe. And so sometimes thoughts or emotions have like a um goal, I guess I would say, of prompting you to some sort of action in a positive way. So I think one thing to clarify is that everything your brain or your body does is for your benefit. So we need to be careful when we interpret these things that it always comes from that place of understanding that your thoughts and your emotions are always there for your benefit in some way. So even so, what you're talking about, scary stuff comes from originating from a positive place, and then we can sort of get involved and mess it up ourselves, right, with our interpretation of it. But the origination of that was from a positive place. Same thing with things like when a betrayed partner is really kind of going through it and they're in shock and anxiety and all this kind of stuff. These emotions can come up that are prompting you to do things like set some boundaries in your relationship, have difficult conversations, find safety, protect yourself, those sorts of things. And so within this conversation, I just thought that was something maybe important to clarify as well. If somebody's maybe listening to this and going, well, I have some thoughts about this, and I thought it was telling me, yes, sometimes that is true when we want to make sure that that's clear. I don't know necessarily that that would even fall within the category of intrusive thoughts. I think that those are separate. Um,
Yeah. Well, to me, what I also heard is even though we've been talking a lot about letting your thoughts flow, and possibly somebody might have heard that about letting them go, that is not meaning that people have to not have conversations or not set boundaries. I think it's when you let the thoughts go that aren't really serving you and you don't stay in a place of anxiety by having judgment on yourself or your partner,
mhm.
you stay in a place of clarity. And that makes it much easier to decide what conversations you want to have, what boundaries you want to set, actually how to get safety, because we can never get enough of what we don't need. And
Mm,
if we're acting from an anxious place,
mhm.
like whatever anxiety or our anxious brain tells us to do, like, because even though it's like, I want our safety, if it's like, why don't you check his phone? Or I don't know what, exactly goes on to everyone listening here, but like if we're acting from an insecure place, we can never get enough of that. So knowing, using your feelings as guidance, letting go of the thinking that's not really serving us helps us be in a place of clarity. So it's
Yeah.
much clearer. And then we're going to be in a much better feeling to have a conversation and actually get our needs met.
Yes.
Um,
I
and
love that you clarified that. Letting go of the thoughts that aren't serving you. And I love what you said, letting things flow doesn't always mean letting things go. And so then when you allow the thoughts to flow, and we talked about this earlier, but applying it to this particular scenario, when the snow in the snow globe calms down, you're going to have more clarity, and you're going to, what I'm hearing when you're saying this, and when I'm thinking about the experiences in these particular situations, the clarity and the calm is a more aligned, more calm nervous system, which then allows you to come from a place that is more effective in communication and making clear thinking decisions.
Yeah, yeah. Like my partner and I are working through something, and I have been in a bad feeling for a while about it. And my thinking wasn't helpful, but I knew it, but it was what I was the best I could do. But I've been in a better place. And because I finally am not holding on to that thought,
Mm.
um, I've had better feeling thoughts. And one of them was like, and I'm trying to, you probably know when you have insight, sometimes it's hard to put the exact words to it because it's more this feeling about it. But if I was trying to put words to it, it was, I can have my boundary here and still be in a loving feeling. Like I don't
Mm.
have to be mad and miserable, because I do think like I would hold on to thoughts about him, but it actually hurt me. And so I realized I don't have to be miserable to get what I want, because I
Mm.
thought until just recently, I thought by me having a boundary, I had to be miserable. Like it sounds so silly to say it, but like I had to be unhappy and withhold love.
Mm.
And in a clear state of mind, I can see, oh, I can be in a loving feeling in a clear head and still have this boundary and I don't know if that's kind of coming through.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Oh, I don't have to be miserable and withhold love for him or our relationship.
I think all of the ways that you describe things and kind of talk about how the brain works and how we approach thoughts and things like that, I think it's a very empowering place to come from, because I think when you are how do I word this? I think when you are calm and aligned in your nervous system, you actually have more power. I'm not saying power over another person, but you have more positive energy. You have more power in terms of you feel grounded, right? You feel solid. You feel confident in who you are. From that place, we make good decisions. We make good decisions that protect ourselves. We make good decisions about the conversations we have. And that doesn't mean that those conversations have to be elevated and escalated and charged to be effective. In fact, I would say most often when we come from a more calm, aligned place, that's when our thoughts and our thinking and our communication is much, much more impactful and effective. I had someone I talked to once term that as quiet power. And that always stuck with me, because I was talking to her one time and I said, I think I was struggling with something with Keegan at the time. This was years and years ago. And, we would sometimes butt heads and that sort of thing. And our relationship was just, it struggled in that way sometimes. And, I think it was very much kind of this idea, and she termed it quiet power. And it's like, quiet power, like you don't have to be, you don't have to come across loud, you don't have to come across quote unquote overpowering to be powerful. um and so you just think about like the people that come across as the most impactful, the most wise, come from that calm, safe place.
Yeah, yeah. I absolutely love that. And I think we can, when our thoughts come from that place, like our wisdom and common sense, I probably have used that analogy that I heard from Jack Pransky, that our wisdom is like this gentle flute, and our anxious thinking or the other things like this loud brass band.
Mm.
And I love that you said that, this quiet strength, quiet wisdom, quiet power, that's like our wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
you know and it's just solid, it's there, but it's not the loudest voice in the room, and sometimes those thoughts that are really loud aren't the ones worth listening to, or and so I just had a client right before this she's new to the three principles conversation, and she was starting to see, oh wait, maybe she thought she had to get herself really worked up to set boundaries, and she's
Mm-hmm.
starting to realize just everything that you said, like, oh, maybe I can be quiet and grounded and set boundaries. Because then sometimes when we get worked up, we say things that we regret, and we set boundaries in a way that we regret and we want to repair from.
Mm.
And it's
Oh,
like,
that's
oh,
so true.
yeah,
That's so
but
anytime I feel like I'm like super charged or like defensive, even if I'm trying to be calm the way I'm coming across, but if it's internally I'm like really defensive, I'm like that did not feel good. It just doesn't feel good. It doesn't go as well as you want it to go.
yeah. And I'm just seeing this in my relationship in this one area. And that's why it's like there's so many opportunities for our understanding to go deeper. Cause this was just something, and I thought I was making it more black and white. Oh, either I had to let go of something important to me. And it, or be in a loving feeling or let go of this. And it was like, no, this both, and I
Mm-hmm.
need a loving feeling and have this thing or this boundary too. And it was like, I mean, it seems so silly, but I keep having insights, and my understanding keeps going deeper. And it was like, and that's new for me
Yeah.
um, and it's still unfolding. And I think where I'm at now, I'm more okay with things being slow. I have more patience. I used to be very uncomfortable, I think, in the gray,
Mm.
like whether it was my own mental health feeling gray, but 100% gray in relationships. No. And it's like, oh, wait, no, I'm okay that sometimes things in relationships can be wherever they are and they can work their way out. And it's okay to be in this middle of things.
Mm.
And even in the middle, I don't need to withhold love or ruminate about something. And I didn't mean to go off on a tangent,
Oh,
but
no,
just
no.
I was seeing personally, like,
Mm.
and so I think it's a really cool thing to see.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a couple more minutes for just a couple
Yeah.
more questions? Okay. Um, do you have time to just summarize your three principles practitioner?
Uh-huh.
What are those principles? Because that guides all of your advice, all of your content, everything, how you approach this.
Yeah. Yeah.
What
So,
what does that mean?
well, the principles are happening whether we know about them or not. They are just facts like gravity. So gravity, even if a baby doesn't know about gravity, gravity is still having its impact on the baby. So the principles are just are here whether we know about them or not. And having an understanding of them is what can help people let me live from that quiet power, live in a good feeling, stop
Mhm.
their suffering. Just as if somebody, when we understand something, we're less likely to get hurt. Like, I'm not going to go and try to work on the electrical of this house because I have no understanding. But if I understood it, I could go and do some work.
Mhm.
And so the principles help us understand human psychological functioning, the way we work as humans. And so one fact is that we have an innate intelligence, and I think that's kind of hard to argue because we can see that in how babies grow, in how there's chameleons and zebras, and how doctors don't heal broken bones. Like, they put a cast on, and this innate intelligence
Mm.
heals that
Yeah.
bone. And
Yeah.
so in the three principles language, sometimes this is referred to as universal mind, or this innate intelligence, this wisdom, and this common sense. This is a thing that's behind our brain,
Mhm.
powering our brain, powering our bodies, but that is so natural. It is in nature how an acorn grows into a tree. So it's like, okay, we can all agree, yeah, there is some innate intelligence here. There is something beyond our brain that's in us, that's in the world, that's in nature. Um, and that one we could talk about for hours and hours. But a lot of that is when we fall out of our thinking, we allow our wisdom and common sense to break through. And if it's the wisdom that creates planets, whatever problem we've got in our relationship, it's no match for wisdom. So oftentimes people get, so me included, which I've been doing in my relationship, we rely on our brain and our thinking. And it's actually so limited compared to this innate intelligence that makes chameleons and zebras and babies. And so it's like wisdom is waiting to break through. And so it's really, like, to me, understanding that part of universal mind, of this impersonal mind, was the thing that was missing from so many things. And that was really like, that's this quiet power that we fall out of our head where we don't have an idea and how is this going to work out, and we fall into our heart, this God in us, whatever it would be, is so
I was gonna
powerful.
say, I think there's a conversation you and I had where maybe you phrase it like the God light inside of you. And you know, so from a Christian background, so the Bible talks about having you know, the truth written on your heart.
Yeah.
And so I do think there is, you know, there is however you want to phrase that in terms of like this, there's an inner knowing of truth, I think, or the capability of knowing truth or seeing it or um however you are kind of are wording that with the wisdom and things like that. Um and I love too that you practice this and you teach this and you just gave an example of how you're still applying it and learning new things and in your relationship and you are um it's a practice, right? I don't know that there's I think a lot, especially when we're struggling, we always want to feel like there's an end of the road that we can somehow cross this finish line and be like, I'm never gonna have another intrusive thought ever again. I'm never gonna feel anxious ever again. And I don't necessarily think that's possible being a human, right? Like it's just our brain works that way, our emotions work that way. They're here for a reason. Things happen, different relationships happen, you're in different environments and that sort of thing. And when you begin to practice these different things and when it kind of soaks in and when you start to uh literally practice it, I think, of just the understanding and the awareness and kind of letting the thoughts flow as you say, it becomes more and more and more uh, easy, whereas maybe rumination was easier before.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, there's always more to see, and it's having this understanding doesn't mean that life stops. Like to me, it's just sometimes, um, yeah, I think at the beginning I was like, tell me something so I'll never be anxious again. And it's like, um, well, I mean, I'm very rarely anxious, but like I don't mind because I have an understanding. So if I'm anxious, sure, I might be anxious for a few minutes and I totally understand it. And I'm open to all experiences of life. Um, and so, but that was one principle. So if you want me to say two more, and then we can kind of just but to me, I also think it's just like just a human in life. Just as I still eat food and exercise, and it's not like I've exercised now and so I never exercise again. And now that I've gotten a good night's sleep, like it's
Right.
like, no, life's still going to happen. But when you have an understanding about it,
Mhm.
um, it makes it a more enjoyable. And it's very,
So
I
much less stress. So
yeah,
much less stress. Yeah.
and I start to know, well, I'm not going to, and we get to see it for ourselves. I'm not going to get good guidance from ruminating. I get so excited that I know I have this innate intelligence, although I kind of forgot it and I was ruminating about something in my relationship, but that's okay. Um, because also I wasn't that hard on myself there. Like it didn't go so low. Um, so we touched on the principle of mind. And then there's thought, which we all know we all have thoughts. You know, they come, thought is a gift. It's, you know, on the topic of intrusive thoughts, if someone was wanting to write a movie, they get really excited that they had this thought about cheating, you know, that makes it for a great script or whatever, or harm or anything. They're like, oh, great idea. You know, so all thoughts really are neutral until we breathe life into them, you know, and so the principle of thought is that thought kind of comes from nothingness, and it can be a thinky thought like I am hungry, but actually that thought could also be a sensation. You know, sometimes people, probably people that are musicians, might get notes in their head, or if they're a dancer, like, well, they just see some dance moves. And so it's images, it's thoughts, it's pain we experience via our thinking, memories. So it comes from nothing and it comes into our consciousness and then it goes, because the nature of thought is that it's fluid, just as the nature of water is that it's wet, fire, it's hot, thoughts, fluid, flowing, transient. Um, and so that can also tie into the third principle of consciousness, which to me has two parts. Consciousness brings our thoughts to life. So if I was getting my wisdom teeth out, or when I did get my wisdom teeth out, I was unconscious. I wasn't aware of my experience. You know, life was happening around me, but I wasn't conscious. So I don't know if I had thoughts then. I don't know what happens, but whatever. That's okay. Consciousness brings our thoughts to life, whether they're true or not. You know, if there was a big commotion downstairs, who knows, maybe my thought was like, oh my God, is someone breaking in? I would have a response to that. Probably like I would have a stress response.
Mhm.
I would get startled. That would happen so quickly, or um, if somebody in the context that you're talking of, say they heard I can hear my boyfriend when he gets a text on his computer, it goes ding. So there was one time, this was a true story. He was on an airplane and almost always, actually until then, he'd always call me every time before takeoff. And so this time, probably I was to bring in the second part of consciousness, it's our state of mind. So our consciousness can go up and down. We have no
Mhm.
control of it. Sometimes you just wake up on the wrong side of the bed. But there can be other factors. But so I was in a lower state of consciousness. I was in a more insecure state of mind, which I knew sometimes used to happen to me more when my boyfriend would go out of town. So I heard he didn't call me was the first thing. And then I heard the ding off. My brain's like, he's cheating. That's what it is. I had a full experience of that. So consciousness gives us a full experience. We feel our
Mm.
thinking with our senses, whether it's a cheating example or we hear someone knocks on our door and we're like, it's a murderer. We can feel it, because that's why if someone says, oh, it's just a thought, it's not like a black and white thought. We feel our thinking because of consciousness. But so understanding that can be like, just because I feel something strongly doesn't mean it's true, can help us know and get our bearings straight. And also when we understand our state of mind, say, for example, you might be like me, or who knows, I don't know how I'll feel next time my boyfriend goes out of town. But in the past, sometimes I'm in a more insecure state of mind. So I'm definitely going to take my thinking with a grain of salt. Or or sometimes around my period, or if it's a hormonal thing, I might be in a more insecure state of mind, a different state of consciousness. And when we understand that, it's not a problem, because we are like, okay, I'm going to take my thinking with a grain of salt, my thinking and my feeling. um, can help us kind of understand that, because consciousness changes. And when our consciousness rises, something that looked like a problem might not be a problem. And also we just might have better thoughts or a better thing to deal.
Yeah.
The same thing can happen if someone's in a really frustrated, horrible state of mind and they stub their toe. It can be like, oh, and if you're in a
End of the
great,
world.
your friends are coming over
Yeah.
and you go to get the pizza at the door and you stub your toe, you can brush it off.
Yeah.
Um, So I think, to me, those are the three principles. And having an understanding of those and how they interact in our lives can just be really helpful.
Oh, totally. Absolutely. I think understanding thought, the way you explained it earlier, so I don't know if I'm going to word this correctly, but I think the second principle when you're talking about thought flowing, I think sometimes when you understand that well enough, it almost stops the third one from coming into existence, the bodily reaction to the thought, right? And so, but then sometimes it just happens. Like there are certain things that are, maybe super triggering for you, or you're very tired, like you were saying. Like I definitely think when and that would be very applicable to be trade partners in the first 6 months or so, where they're just very on edge and their nervous system is really raw. Like there's going to be a lot more rumination that's more likely, and it's going to end up in that third phase where it's like my body is activated and things like that. And so I think when you understand the second point, sometimes that may prohibit the third from happening, all the body sensations and the activation. But when we understand what's happening, sometimes it can shorten it, or it will allow the experience to move through maybe more quickly or in a more calm way. And then I think always going back to the first one, sort of recognizing, that there is this intelligence. Our brains and our bodies do have the ability to heal. We are okay. We will be okay, almost regardless of what's happening in life, that there, that it will be okay. And that there is that innate healing and recovery that is available even when things feel very scary in our brain. Because I have been in places with my brain, and I know you have been as well, and we didn't have time to really go into some of your recovery stories, but please follow her on social media, because she talks about like all of these very encouraging transformations of clients and personal experience and stuff. But I know that in several different personal experiences in my own life, my brain has gone to like the depths of fear. and just absolute like I don't understand why it's thinking this way, and the fear then just perpetuates it. And
Yeah.
so I think having these understandings and having this awareness around it has been so incredibly helpful for me. And you've played such a huge role in that, Lily. So thank you. But I hope that this is encouraging for humans listening to this podcast, because I think everything that we've talked about is a human experience, right? And so I don't know that any of us are necessarily immune to this. I think maybe there are people that are more susceptible, perhaps, and that goes into what we were just talking about, where you're at in life and what has happened, and all these sorts of different things. But it's a human thing, and so congratulations if you have a scary thought, you're a human.
Yeah.
Welcome to the human experience, and follow Lily because she'll help you not be scared of it.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, thank you. Yeah. And I think when I was thinking of like my Peace from the community, I went like, I guarantee you'll feel less alone because it's, I think, but then we know, oh, like that is such a big sigh of relief to know nothing's wrong with us. We're not alone. And that also sometimes we can have that innocent overreaction,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
especially if we're vulnerable. But
Absolutely. Is there like any resources that you would recommend if this is new to somebody, the idea of, oh my gosh, I just realized that I am somebody that struggles with intrusive thoughts or rumination. Like, is there a resource that you would recommend reading and we will also highly uh, refer to your social media, and I want you to share about your group and everything. Is there like a book that you would recommend on top of that, or to get people kind of
yeah,
started?
yeah. I'm trying to think of what there's one book that I like love so much. I do know that there is a bit of betrayal in it in the story. So I was being mindful about that of wanting to because actually I knew that was something that I had more worries on. So even when I read that book, when there was betrayal in it, I was like, like I almost I took a break for a day of the book, but I love it so much. So I'm just going to say that book, and everybody can use their own discretion of just know that that is a part of this true story in a book. It's called Seduced by Consciousness by Jack Pransky. And I think he does such a beautiful job of describing the principles and to me, the way that consciousness brings thoughts to life. And there's a lot of beautiful discussion on relationships. But you know what I think could actually be it's a new book that is out that I don't know if the principle of thought, because it's called The Secret to Mental Health by George Pransky, and it's such an amazing book. Okay, well now I'm like going off on to tangents because
That's okay.
there's not like a specific like, oh, intrusive thoughts, but I think The Secret to Mental Health by George Pransky, and he also has another book that's amazing on relationships called The Relationship Handbook. So just kind of thinking of your audience. But another book that I do love on thought is called Just a Thought. I'm holding it up in the video, Just a Thought by Amy Johnson. It's really, really great. I think it just in terms of the discussion that we've been having on our brain. And so kind of she really goes into detail about understanding thought and the brains worry, they dramatize, they catastrophize, they think we're never good enough. And so I really love those books.
Awesome.
Yeah, so those would be some
Thank
of
you. And I mean,
my
I really can't overstate it enough. If this resonates with you, please go follow Lily on social media because your videos are so bold in some ways. You talk about all the things that people are afraid to talk about, and you bring them into the light. So thank you for being brave and doing that. So how can people find you? Talk a little bit about your community, your social media handles, all of that. If they want to work with you, whatever you want to share.
Thank you. So on TikTok, I'm at Peace from Within. And there you can also find all my links too. But on Instagram, I'm just underscore Peace from Within. 3.5 years later, I would probably not do an underscore, but it's pretty easy. You see me. And yeah, I share so much. I really love making videos. It is actually like a real joy for me to get to share this. So I literally have like almost 3,000 videos on Instagram, but I also have a YouTube channel that you can find where I post longer videos. I have a really great free intrusive thoughts masterclass also that's just 35 minutes. And the whole premise of that is on the innocent misunderstanding and innocent overreaction. So people absolutely love that. And then I have a community that's a monthly membership, and it has everything there, all my courses that cover pretty much everything anxiety in terms of intrusive thoughts or health anxiety and worry and driving anxiety.
And you just came out with a course for like OCD, right?
Yeah, well, that one that's a live group that we were
Oh,
doing.
live group. Okay.
And so, but there's so many resources in the community
Hmm.
that's so helpful for OCD. And also you can try it free for 3 days. And so you can go and there's so much on intrusive thoughts. If you want to just watch it all,
Yep.
you can do that.
I will highly recommend. So we'll put some links in the show notes as well so people can kind of click those and take a look and follow you. But really, truly, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure you hear this all the time. I know you've made such an impact on so many people's lives just by your willingness to talk about this out loud. And then even more so coaching people and offering the groups and that sort of thing, and just bringing compassion to a place in people's lives where they feel very afraid. So thank you for doing what you do, Lily. I just appreciate you so much, and thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. And I feel like the same would be probably true for you. Everybody that's listening is like, hey, that's you. That's what you do for me. Right.
Thank you. Thank you.